Please rise as you're able for the gospel reading. The Gospel of Matthew. All right, I think this is telling me that we need to pray, Kevin. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord. Amen. That's the pastor's prayer, which I didn't say before we started. All right, so the Gospel of Matthew, the 25th chapter, verses 14 through 30. For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received 5 talents went off at once and traded with them, and made 5 more talents. In the same way, one who had 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. And then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See that I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one who had 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See that I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, I gather where I did not scatter. Then you ought to have invested my money with bankers, and upon my return I would have received what was mine with interest. So take the talent from him, give it to the one with 10 talents. For all those who have, more will be given, and they will have abundance. And from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. For this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
So today we have one of our most famous parables. We call it the parable of the talents. And there's many things that we could talk about with the parable of the talents. It touches on many things. But I think I want to talk about one of the more common interpretations today. And it's one of those that ends up in movies and books. And one of these happens to end up in one of my favorite sci-fi books. Now, I don't think anybody's surprised that it came from a sci-fi book. But here is the main character. We have Harry, and he's not religious at all. But his friend and his friend's family is. And his friend is a father who's trying to teach his daughter about responsibility. So, his father asks his friend, what the Bible says about responsibility with what you are given. And of course, Harry has no idea. And the daughter, Molly, decides that it's time to recite the parable of the talents. And I'm going to summarize the parable of the talents for you right here. The master is going away for a while and has trusted his 3 servants. He gives them different amounts of his property, and it's all based on their abilities. 2 servants receive a lot more property than the last one. Those 2 do something with that property that makes up more and ends up making a lot more. And the other one just hides it. And he just gives it back when the time comes. And the master is pleased with 2 servants and very angry with the 3rd. For you are expected to do your best with what you got, and much is expected for those that receive a lot. And so when Harry hears this, he immediately says this, the Spider-Man parable. You see, for those that don't know Spider-Man, there is the biggest adage from Spider-Man. with great power comes great responsibility. It's a major theme of the comic book, and it's a major theme of every TV show and movie that's been based on Spider-Man. And I happen to agree with Harry that Spider-Man does sum up the parable of the talents very well. My favorite version of Spider-Man just gets his powers. And remember, his real name is Peter, and we're going to just call him Peter Parker from now on. And his Uncle Ben, he was the father figure in the story, and he gave him all sorts of wisdom. And he was the one that sat Peter down and said, with great power comes great responsibility. And Peter, all he wants is a car. He just wants a car. And so now he has all these powers, and there is a wrestling tournament coming up, and so he decides that he wants to enter into that tournament and win that prize. And he wins. But then he doesn't get anything from it because the owner of the contest stiffs him and doesn't pay him. And what ends up happening is that somebody tries to rob that owner, and Peter just lets him go. And the owner asks, "Why did you do that? You could have wiped the floor with him." And Peter replies, "I don't see how that's my problem." Well, here's the thing, is if Peter had seen how that was his problem, what was about to happen wouldn't have happened. Because our story becomes a little tragic now. Uncle Ben was waiting for Peter. He was waiting in the car for him to finish. So what did Uncle Ben see? He sees the guy running away from the wrestling match. He tries to stop him, and he gets shot in the process. And then he ends up dying. And Peter decides that he's going to get revenge. And he goes and tracks down this guy. And then he finds out it's the guy that he didn't stop. And then he finds out that even if he had just acted responsibly, even though the owner didn't give him the money he deserved, his uncle would have still been alive. And so we have, with great power comes great responsibility. I really used to not like this parable very much. See, the one that gets the least seems to be treated very badly. It really seems unfair. And is it any wonder why the one with the least did the least? I think it shows a lack of trust, in my opinion, on the master's part. And I think many times if you try to divide by ability and you aren't God, you're going to be wrong. Notice, I changed on who I thought the master was. Many people think it's God, but I think we're focusing on the wrong things. I think, as I look at this again and again, that this has more to do with the character of the three servants than it does with who the master is. This has to do with what they did with the property, not the property itself. So the two servants that received the most, well, they used the property they were given. They did their best. They used their best abilities and they got a huge return. Both of them did this. The third one didn't use it at all. The third one hid the money and the third one returned it. The third one was like Spider-Man, not using his ability when he needed it. And it ended up being a great cost to both that servant and to Spider-Man. So I think it's also really easy to look at this parable and start thinking about two things. The first is talents. Right? It's in the name. You know, he gives them talents based on their abilities. Well, here's the thing. It's the talent, as what our author Matthew is talking about, is actually a measurement. So it's either 75 pounds or a measurement of money. And when we're talking about money, it's the wages somebody would earn over 20 years. So, in other words, it would be how much money you would make in a lifetime or an astronomical sum of money, whichever you want to refer to take in. So, in other words, the first person gets 5 times what a normal person makes in their entire lifetime. The second gets 2 times what somebody gets paid in their entire lifetime. And the last one only gets what's expected. Remember that. They got what was expected. They got an astronomical sum of money. And so, all 3 of them got wondrous gifts. So the word talent here really isn't about the ability of the people. but it's about what was given to these people. It has more to do with the character of each of them, using that gift that was given. And I do think they are gifts, because the Master had given each an amazing gift, even the last person that only received 1 talent. And what was expected here was each of them would use that gift and make more. But remember, we're not talking about money here. We are talking about gifts from God. These are gifts of the Spirit that we get as part of our salvation. And I think many of us tend to treat our gifts from God as if God gave us a sports car, let's say a Dodge Viper. And we put it in our garage. And we wash it. And we plug the battery in knowing that since we're not going to drive it, that battery will die. But we never drive it. It stays in the garage. Well, right now, that would be smart, considering sports cars don't do well on snow and ice. But we still never drive it, and we still never use that gift. That isn't why we're giving gifts. We aren't giving gifts simply to never use them. In my case, the example I gave was putting the gift in a museum instead of hiding it in a hole. But the effect is the same. We weren't using it, and we weren't sharing it. We were just letting it sit in the garage. It's kind of like having a mint comic book or a mint condition toy, and it just sits in the display case, and it's never used. Or here's another one. Let's say that we prepared for a storm. Let's say that we were preparing for a major power outage, and we bought the biggest generator we could. But then we never used it. We never used it even to test it. But we did buy the gas, and we did buy the oil, and we did buy all the spark plugs and everything that we needed to get it running. But by the time the storm hit, the gas was old. We didn't check the spark plug. We didn't check anything, and then it didn't start, and we wondered why. See, God isn't trying to justify why some get more and some get less. You know, we could say this is a commentary on our world, but it isn't more or less so than what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes. And so we'll leave that to Solomon right now. The comment is on character. What do you do with your gifts? And your gifts aren't all things that you have. In many cases, they are what you are. Some of us have the gift of teaching. Some of us have the gift of great faith. Some of us have the gift of their hands, where they can do nearly anything with their hands. But what's important is that we use these gifts. Because God doesn't give these just because. They're meant to be used. See, everything on earth is God's. Meaning that if you are in possession of it, you are being entrusted with its use. And this is for spiritual and material. God expects much from people that have much in this world. God expects much from each of us, regardless of how much we do get in this world. This is why we are all given spiritual gifts as well. Which is why I can say with great confidence, with great power comes great responsibility. Amen.